Welcome to episode 10 of the Give Us Time podcast, the podcast that highlights the extraordinary members of our armed forces and their families. Today's guest is a truly remarkable man. He spent 25 years in the British military. He started his career as a tankie before going on to wear the green beret of the Royal Marines, and finally he went on to join the world famous SAS, where he spent 16 years of his career. We are pleased to welcome Ken Hames to the podcast. Ken, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
And joining alongside me is Give Us Time Ambassador Scotty Derrick.
Hello.
All right, so Ken, the first question we want to know is why did you want to go and join the army?
Well, I grew up on a sheep farm in the kind of highlands of Derbyshire, and there's a lot of history how we got there, the family. But I guess I was always in the outdoors, bringing sheep down off the fell and getting cold and wet and miserable. My prized possession were my Wellingtons and my duffel coat. It's we were pretty poor, really. We didn't really have an awful lot. A cranky old car, television that didn't work, Christmas tree lights that blew up every Christmas, all that kind of stuff. And but I'd read books about the army, and my dad was in the army, and I just looked at it and thought, this looks great. Look at all the kit they've got, and you can ride a horse. And I was a very simple individual. My life revolved around agriculture. Okay, so, this was all a magical world, beyond the end of the lane, which I'd never been. Give you an idea, I never went on a summer holiday as a kid, ever. The first time I saw the sea, I stood there for 10 minutes. I couldn't believe it.
Oh,
so I was that kind of, institutionalized in agriculture. Yeah.
So what kind of role did your parents have then in your decision to join the military? You went and said that your dad was a part of it.
Yeah, my dad was a curious character. He was highly educated, but he was full of bullet holes. He'd taken a few for the Queen, and it had affected his mental health. There's no doubt. And he wouldn't think anything of drinking a bottle of whiskey in a day. So it was a bit checkered in some respects, because the farming element was my grandfather's element of it, and my uncle's, not his. But I had his old chindit. He was a chindit, Second World War. I had his old chindit hat and that kind of stuff. But he was a damaged individual. There's no doubt about that. He'd seen some bad things and pulled out all his teeth in the jungle. People forget that our mums and dads and our mums and dads, grandfathers, they put up with a pile of SH1T in their lives. Probably looking down from above, thinking, yeah, you've got a little problem here to sort out. But yeah, no, he didn't push me, though. He didn't push me. He wanted me to, but he didn't push me into the military.
Oh wow, I didn't. Yeah, I think Scotty, you can want to add to that a little bit there.
Absolutely. We were just chatting a couple of weeks ago. My uncle, he was in Korea as well, and we kind of forget about these other far field conflicts that a lot of men and women are involved with. And it was very interesting there, Ken, to hear you say about your dad drinking a bottle of whiskey wouldn't faze him in a day because of issues. That's something that happened to me. I didn't know who to speak to, who to ask for help. So that's where I turned. I turned to the bottle quite a lot. And then I turned to cocaine, heroin, and other things to try and make images disappear. But thankfully, touch wood, we're on the right path now, and we're moving forward, which is great. But we kind of were too quick to forget about the real sacrifices that the men and women who have done for us to enable us to sit in this house, like yourself, Ken, doing the operations you have that people have no idea about, and gives us that security that we're in today.
Yeah, I think our granddads, I mean, they were fighting a brutal regimes. I mean, like you just can't imagine, And like my dad was, fighting the Japanese, another absolutely brutal. I think anything chopping your arm off or chopping your head off or not feeding you for months. So yeah, Dad was full of holes. Now it's only later on in life you start to understand, when you've been through it yourself, and you face some of your demons, it's only now you understand what. And they weren't encouraged to talk about it.
Oh yeah,
They were just told to shut up.
Frowned upon.
My dad, who grew up in a Scottish Presbyterian family, he was just stuffed in a cupboard basically and told, right, you'll be seen and not heard, and that's the way they live their life.
Yeah, exactly the same. When I got brought up, my father and my grandfather and father were both miners. So in the war effort, my grandfather was providing all the coal to make stuff in industry, and my father was down the pits as well. And I remember I was exact same. I had a bit of a boisterous childhood, but I was locked in something similar. But even though back the 70s or 80s, I was locked in a room and locked in and speak when spoken to. And I remember if I did something wrong, I got a good hiding. And if I did something right, I just got a lesser hiding. So it wasn't, or thrown out to the hills to go and walk for a few days. So yeah, all good now. But yeah, absolutely. What men and women have gone through, and as you said, those poor kids in those years have gone past. Shocking. And sometimes we are, as a society, we probably are too quick to forget about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, Ken, so from growing up in that sort of, you must have seen what was going on with your dad then, and so that just didn't faze you at all, and you were still very committed to joining the army.
Yeah, I didn't understand. Really and honestly, I didn't understand his mentality. I just saw him as a man who was, angry and angry with the world. And but there were good times. I don't want to paint too dark a picture. We grew up in an idyllic place with beautiful rivers and fantastic countryside. And I started surviving when I was a kid because I had to forage a lot, and I lived in barns and extreme cold, and we didn't have central heating, anything like that at all. And my clothes were very fundamental, socks, wellies, and duffel coat. But so at that time, I think I was hardened to the outdoors already. Snow, gales, that didn't faze me at all. That was fun. That's with the weather turning its cheek a bit. But yeah, so I was ready to make the big leap.
I mean, I want to know now, what was it like then as a 16-year-old going from this kind of, it sounds very idyllic and very picturesque as well, very, so when you went and joined, where was your first barracks then? Where did you go into?
I went to the Junior Leaders Regiment Royal Armoured Corps down in Bovington. And it was curious, actually. You mentioned this is a wide-eyed kid. And only 5 miles down the road, there was a nuclear power station called AEE Winfrith. And I thought, well, that's not safe, is it? That's not safe. Why did somebody put this barracks here? So you have all these little impressions when you're a kid. And Scotty will go for this. When you're a young soldier, the exciting things in life are a biscuit and a pint of milk at 10 o'clock in the morning when the old naffy van comes around, and getting your first pint of beer, having your first girlfriend, all that kind of stuff is all there. And we used to guard when we weren't being trained as tankies. We used to guard the tank museum, and we were told that there was a ghost in there. So every time we went on guard, I remember 16 years old, and there was a ghost of a German, who got found in the engine of a Tiger tank. So when we went, we used to kind of stand back to back in case we ran into Herman the German in the barracks. But I tell you what, it was fantastic because you got 3 meals a day. I mean, for me, 3 meals a day, fantastic uniform. You got to get in play in these massive, 50-ton tanks, run all over the countryside, going out with bound courses. It was like, it was brilliant. I loved it. I loved every second of it. But I did get bullied a bit, though. I did get bullied a bit when I was there because I didn't understand some of these guys from Newcastle who didn't speak the same language as me. And they wouldn't think twice about just giving you a punch on the nose for no reason. So actually, the Scottish guys were actually the milder ones. I got on really well with the Scots guys. They didn't throw the weight around, but some of these other Englishmen did. I don't know why. Inferiority complex, isn't it, Scotty?
Yeah, that's right. But the jocks know they've got that in their pocket. You see, they just need to bring that out when required.
No, they spoke a completely different language.
They should come with subtitles up there.
But they came from tough backgrounds. Some of them came from really tough backgrounds, and you know, you have to grow up pretty quick. You know, between 16 and 17, you know, you're kind of going from being a boy to a man. Only just, you know, because you're not even at 18. When I wasn't even 18 when I joined my regiment, the 9th 12th Lancers in Germany, after a year and a half of kind of fairly intensive training, and there was a little spell where I went to the RAC Independent Parachute Squadron, which was part of the old 16 Parachute Brigade. And like all good things, I got there and someone said, well, don't unpack your bag because it's being disbanded. So, you know, I didn't know what disbanded meant. What, you're just going to pack up and go home? I said, no. So I went back. So I ended up back in Germany, where the regiment, the 9th 12th Lancers, were part of the 4th Armoured Division. And that, again, another fantastic experience, because we were allowed to drive anywhere we liked, through people's fields, just making complete wreckage of the German countryside in this kind of premise that we were keeping the Russians at bay, you know, the old Warsaw Pact before 1990. But yeah, going, you know, leaping from the 9th, leaping from the junior leaders into Germany was another culture shock for me. Getting on an aeroplane, flying for the first time, landing, and just German girls who took the most incredible interest in you. You know, yes. I think more from a scientific point of view than anything else.
I must admit, yeah, Germany. I've got very fond memories of Germany. Yeah, it's a very nice country.
Oh, crikey! Yeah, but good stuff.
Oh, brilliant. So you were in Germany then up until you were 18 then, or how long were you in Germany for then, Ken?
It was about a year and a half, and for some reason, I have no idea to this day. They must have seen some potential in me somewhere for something, because I had not a qualification to my name really. I had an O level in woodwork, a GCSE in woodwork, and nice. and one in English. Forget that, and a few other bits and bobs. But they said they clearly, thought, well, this guy's not a bad leader. So they sent me on an outward bound course to Tywyn in Wales. And then you run down to the sea every day and go for a swim at 5 o'clock, which is pretty brutal.
Yeah, that sounds it.
Certainly wakes you up in the morning. And then you spent the rest of the day rowing whalers and beating your chest and running over the mountains and eating an enormous amount of food. Anyway, I did all right on that outward bound course, and then I got selected for the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, but before I went to Sandhurst at about 18, I had to go to the Army School of Education because I couldn't read or write, which was a bit of a disadvantage. And my some of my scrawly Beetle type writing, so I had to go and do a bit more education. But then I ended up at the Royal Military Academy, and really wide-eyed, even more wide-eyed than I was before, because quite a bounce from 16, 17, 18, from being a junior to going to a regiment in Germany and being part of all that, and then going to Sandhurst, where I met a completely different animal there.
Oh dear.
From posh schools, dear. And then I didn't understand what they were saying either. I got into enormous trouble on day one at Sandhurst, because everybody had to go and buy. Well, when I went to the Beaconsfield place, the Army School of Education, the Sergeant Major, who was a Grenadier Guardsman who was looking after potential officers in that place, he said, where did you get that suit from? I said, hey, this is top drawer, Sergeant Major, He said, well, it's not exactly Savile Row, is it? I said, no. He said, well, get rid of it. I said, oh, crikey. I said, I said, I haven't got much money. And you know, he took his wallet out and he gave me 70 quid, which was a lot of money in those days. He gave me £70. He said, pay me back when you can. He said, but go down to that place and go down there, buy yourself X, Y, and Z, sports jacket, pair of cavalry twill trousers, pair of brogues, you know, cat flat hat, you know, horse.
Oh, wow.
Horse.
And it was
70
just
quid.
70 quid he gave me, and I went away and bought those things because he said, you cannot, sir. He said, you cannot go to Sandhurst looking, you know, like that with a kipper tie, you know, and big lapels. The glam rock boy can't go there. And, but on day one in the dining hall at Sandhurst, this guy, he looked over the table at me and he said, "Are you a squaddy?" Which is a very derogatory term. That's why I never use it. I never call soldiers squaddies. They're soldiers, they're privates, or they're troopers, or they're engineers, or whatever. I think it was always a derogatory term. He said, "Are you a squaddy?" I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Well, so what if I am?" You know? He said, "Well, I hope you're not going to bring your naffy habits in here." Whoa! So I reached over the table and I grabbed him by the hair, and stuffed his head in the soup tureen, a big bowl of soup. Poof, straight in. Of course, the soup spilt all over the table, and then all these guys wearing their very expensive suits on day one, trying to look in, you know, all jumped up, you know, soup all over the place. And the next morning, this colour sergeant came up to me. He said, "Officer Grenade Hames." "Yes, colour." He said, "You know how to march, don't you?" "Yes, colour." Left, right, left, right, left, all the way down the corridor. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left turn, left time, mark time, halt. There I was in front of the college commander, day one.
Oh dear.
And he's reading the Racing Post, right? So he's checking the horses. Checking the form. He's checking the form for the day. And anyway, and then the sergeant major says, "Sir, Officer Cadet Hames on report on day one at the Royal Military Academy, having stuffed Officer Cadet O'Reilly's head in the soup tureen, sir." And he said, he didn't even look up. He said, "Hames, why did you stuff O'Reilly's head in the soup tureen?" He said, "Well, he called me a squaddy, sir." Did he? And what else did he say? He said, "Well, I wasn't to bring my naffy habits into the officers' mess." And he went, ticked another horse. "Well, clearly you did." "Well done." Said, "Well done.
Carry on.
Well done." March out. So I got marched out, and then this colour sergeant took me on the square and beasted me up and down for about half an hour. He said, "Look, you've got to understand who you are now. You're a bit different now. You know, you can't bring those habits. You can't hit people. Yeah. You can't stuff their head in their food." Yeah. So that was day one. That was day one at Sandhurst. Yeah.
Oh, well, obviously.
You can see the checklist for the SAS coming up. Head and soup. Tick. Loves being cold and wet.
That's right. That's
Not
right,
scared of wearing wellies.
No.
Done.
So, I mean, I want to know. So, what was the rest of your Sandhurst time then like? How, I'm assuming, did you fall in line, or was there similar incidences coming up?
No.
Yeah, so Sandhurst was such a shock to my system, you know, where people had no idea about my background and I had no idea about theirs. And, you know, becoming an officer, it's not easy. You know, you're expected to lead, and you know that's the whole thing Sandhurst is about, leadership. And I think, to be honest, up till when I got to Sandhurst, I really was. I tried to figure out what officers did all day. They seemed to disappear into this place called the officers' mess and never come out again. And then in the regiment I was with, they had horses, and I thought, God, there's all these people wearing jodhpurs and running around and shouting at me, but I've never seen a horse. I didn't see one horse. I saw tanks, but I didn't see a horse. So that was all a bit odd. And of course, in the Knights 12th, the officers were, well, there was a baron and there was a lord and there was an honourable. So it was like being in the royal family, pretty much. Anyway, yeah. So when you kind of become one yourself, or being groomed to be one yourself, it's not easy. I mean, it might look easy to some people, but it's not. And you're a young lad of what I was when I joined Queen's Regiment, the 1st Battalion, the Queen's Regiment, back to Germany. Yeah, it was like bewildering, really, because I'd only been there about a few months, and then we were back to Northern Ireland again, where we spent a lot of our time. Yeah, young 18-year-old, almost I was almost 19 then, between 18 and 19, and commanding 30 guys in an operational setting, which is quite bewildering for a young bloke to do that. And you really rely on your platoon sergeant then. He's the kind of non-commissioned officer, and you totally rely on him to look after you, because he knows the ropes, and the corporals know the ropes, and the private soldiers will just take the mick out of you and you won't know it, and lots of things to learn. But I took some of the lessons of leadership definitely into that battalion. But it's just, I suppose it's just being accepted, really. Eventually you want to be accepted as soon as possible, but you have to kind of earn your spurs, earn your wings when you're on that journey. It's tricky.
So, sorry, how old were you then when you were in charge of these? What did you say, 30 guys?
Yeah, I think I was just 19.
Wow, that must be an absolute shock there, going from 3 years ago you just joined the military, and now 3 years later you're in charge of 30 guys. I'm assuming, similar ages as when you joined, about 16, 17, that sort of time. So, I mean, how as a 19-year-old do you lead 30 guys?
I think with great difficulty. I mean, you try to do your best, and you try to look right, and but you have to learn really, really quickly. And that's the thing. You have to learn off the men, and you have to learn off the NCOs, the lance corporals, the corporals, particularly off your platoon sergeant. He's your right-hand man. And you just have to keep learning, and you have to have a really open mind. Arrogance won't work, and you have to earn the respect of the men, and that is the hardest thing, to earn their respect. So when it comes to cleaning the toilets, when it comes to washing the vehicles, when it comes to give you an example, I used to say to my officers when I got a bit more senior, the ones under my command, I used to say, you're first up, you're last to bed, and you go nowhere until they are fed. You go nowhere until they're looked after, and their needs come before yours. That's how you gain the respect of them, that they see you as someone who's prepared to muck in, someone who's got humility, someone who's gonna have to sometimes lead from the front. You've got to show lead by example. And
I wish all of them would have went by that mindset, Ken.
Yeah.
I wish all of them would have went the same mindset, because there is some that have a bit jacked, to be honest. But they get found out.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, you can't stand in front of one. This is a good leadership principle for people in business. You can't stand in front of people and say, you've got this wrong, unless you squeaky clean yourself. You've got to try and, particularly because when we're in the army, we always were meant to look smart, and there's a great emphasis on cleanliness, and making sure you've done your washing, and making sure you're clean shaven, and making sure all those things, and that's called discipline. And field discipline comes with that, being in the field and being able to do that, living in a ditch. And you can't go and tell somebody off for being scruffy if you're scruffy yourself.
Yeah.
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 You've got to model the way. But it's not hard. It's not easy, particularly when you're in operational settings. And when you go somewhere like Northern Ireland for the first time, you're going to be scared. You're going to be apprehensive, because there are people there who don't want you to be there.
Yeah, I mean, my follow-up question to that is: so Northern Ireland was your first experience of combat then? Obviously, Germany, to an extent, it's not the same. It's a kind of it's a Cold War compared to then going to Northern Ireland. So you're 19 at the time, in charge of 30 guys, and you've also been thrown into your first experience of combat as well, which I imagine is the ultimate the ultimate test in some instances. How did you lead and kind of what was your first experience of combat like in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, with respect, I wouldn't call it combat. It's not a what we call an attritional war, like a conventional war, like the Second World War was. This really, Northern Ireland was what you would call a kind of internal security situation, where two parts of the community were trying to kill each other because they didn't like each other, the Catholics and the Protestants per se, and the Catholics had the IRA and the Protestants had their paramilitary groups as well. And really, the job of the British Army there was to try and keep those two factions apart, and but not to be biased in any direction. I mean, the British had a pretty checkered history in Ireland. If you read your history books, so there wasn't a lot of love lost between the Catholic population and the British Army, as it was known then. But of course, the troops were absolutely brilliant in Northern Ireland across the board. It didn't matter what cap badge they were wearing, whether they were infantry, engineers, Royal Army Ordnance Corps. And everybody was in Northern Ireland, and most people will turn around to you and say, actually, I really enjoyed it because I met some really, really nice people. The vast majority of the population wanted peace. And it's only the crazy factions and those with, hardened political beliefs who were keeping the whole thing going. But for a young officer and young men, it was quite harsh at times. We'd see a lot of things that we didn't want to see, murders, bombs, all that kind of stuff was going on. And sometimes the air was tinged with an enormous amount of sadness. But of course, soldiers are naturally optimistic, and their ability to talk to the population one-to-one over a fence, Catholic or Protestant, didn't matter which, was big part of why the whole thing came out positively, because of the humility that those soldiers showed, and the way that they used to try and win the hearts and minds of the people. They genuinely wanted them to get on. There's no sense of a soldier going out there with a gun thinking, hey, this is great, I've got a gun in my arm, I can go and start shooting. No, they were never, ever like that. And when we were there for sometimes we were there for 6 months. The longest I was there was 18 months on what we called a residential tour. And we did everything. We played rugby with the population. We we weren't locked behind a fence. We did everything we possibly could to integrate with the population, from both sides of the political divide. And luckily, luckily, most of us came out of it unscathed. But it was very difficult at times in some of the riots and some of the bigger bombs that went off and killed a lot of soldiers and a lot of civilians. Tragic times, kind of a mixture of great times, the bad, the best times and the worst times in some respects.
I'm just trying to get it all in chronological order then. So obviously Scotty served in Northern Ireland himself. Scotty, what years were you in Northern Ireland for?
I was there from the end of '95, did a 6-month tour, then came back in when was Bosnia? 97, Kosovo 99, back over in 2000, did another tour with the bomb squad as a covert driver. And then I came, as what Ken was saying there, a residential tour. I came back as a training instructor in Kinniger for my last 3 years in the army, and then out in 2004. So it was, different times, but again, too, the hatred was still there. Didn't matter which decade it was. It just went from one generation to another, which is very sad and unfortunate. And try and educate them properly, but it's just one of those things. Hearts and minds. Ken was right. Every time we were out, and again, too, I was driver then, and we were doing a hard stop, and we're setting up for a while. I was giving out some ration packs and chatting to kids, and just chatting. And as Ken was saying, then the following night you're on the other side. It was a real eye opener for a young lad when I was over there. And then Ken hit the nail on the head. You grow up very quick when you first get over there, because you're expected to do a job, and you're expected to do it when your boots hit the ground. There's not a lot of time for retraining over there. It's get out there, get your job done, and get your men back. And that's very much the case. But going on to what you were chatting about, Ken, quickly about the young officers and your OC saying you're the first up and last to bed. It was, I remember my first experience of a troopie coming into a logistical squadron. It was my staff sergeant handed him a set of coveralls. He said, there's a set of coveralls. I don't want to see you back at that desk for the next 6 months. And the staff sergeant or colour, he made him go out and he had to service, he had to wash you had to see what the guys and girls did on a daily basis before 6 months. He was back. Now he had a better idea of what the guys and girls did when they're out there. And I think it's absolutely right, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to you, Ken, so you were you just finished your first tour of Northern Ireland then. So I'm assuming you're about 20 years old then at the time, something like that. So moving forward then to you were with the Queen's Regiment. What made you then want to take part in the exchange program with the Royal Marines?
Well, I was kind of told that I was going. There wasn't a huge discussion with my boss at the time. So we'd moved back from Germany to Canterbury, and we got back to Canterbury, and we were playing a lot of rugby and drinking a lot of beer and getting up to no good. But I just remember it was the same day of Bus 3 Ribs bloody playing down Canterbury Rugby Club, and I was feeling rough, and the boss said, "Oh, I'm sending you to the Royal Marines for a spell, Ken." I went, "Oh, okay." So it's been another adventure, and in 5 minutes flat, I was gone, and it was. So yes, I mean, he said, "Do you fancy that?" I said, "Yeah, sounds good. You know, we'll give it worth a whiz." But of course, what I didn't realise, I had to do the commando course. There's this thing called the All Arms Commando course, where all the people who support the Royal Marines, and they might be gunners, engineers, or Ordnance Corps, they all support the Royal Marines, and they're not all Navy. The Royal Marine are Navy, of course, but everybody else who supports the Royal Marines, a lot of Army, huge amount of Army support the Royal Marines, and other grey funnel line, as we call it, the people who drive the ships. Anyway, so I ended up on the Commando course, which was tough. Hard work. It's a selection course like anything else, and it's quite brutal from time to time. What I could never, just while we're on the subject, what I could never get my head around is why in training people, run them about, make them do press-ups, but don't injure them. And I'll never forget on that course that there was a couple of people who were so beasted. They used to say, call it a beasting. They were so beasted it injured them, and then they couldn't do anything, and that was them written off. And I remember, because I was a fairly confrontational. I used to speak my mind, and I said, why on earth would we try and train somebody but hurt them at the same time? That never registered with me. Yes, make them sit in a bucket of water and, I don't know, spray them down, come in with cow shit. I don't know. We'll do what you want. But don't injure them, because then you've got a trainee who's never going to return to training. I thought that was just damn stupid. Anyway, that was one memory of that. But, at the end of it, you run across Dartmoor a lot and do a lot of running up and down cliffs, and you learn a lot of new skills. And that's interesting because, Scotty will relate to this. Throughout your career, you're learning new skills, being a leader, being an infantryman, knowing every weapon under the sun, dismantling it, putting it together in the dark, blindfolded, working at night, working in all conditions, mountain, Arctic, desert, whatever it is. And then someone says, right, go on the commando course, learn more skills, boats, swimming in the sea, dropping out of helicopters into the sea, rigid raiders, landing craft, tough. And then lots of tests to make sure that you are so physically, so physically fit you can just run forever. And you run across Dartmoor, and then somebody gives you a green beret, and you stick that on and think it's bulletproof, which it isn't. Only a steel helmet, not even a steel helmet's bulletproof. No. And then I joined 40 Commando in Plymouth.
So how old were you then at the time?
24.
Right.
24.
Absolutely ridiculous.
was packed in quite a lot by then, and yeah, it was. And then we started training for Northern Ireland. Of course, that's a lot of our lives were spent training or going to Northern Ireland. I did 10 separate tours there. It shows how regularly you went. We were in and out there like a yo-yo, so we got to know it pretty well. But yeah, we started to train, and then that didn't turn out. And we then got told, that the Falklands had cropped up.
And then, so you're 24 at the time. What made you? So
trying to work it out. Then, yeah, I was 24. Yes, yes.
So, what was it like then going from Northern Ireland to the Falklands? I imagine that's completely different.
Hey, the Falklands is a long story. Crikey, it was it's a long story. But I think the things that stand up, right? You're going into a proper war now. You're going to go and fight, basically.
Yeah.
Northern Ireland was a bit standoffish for a while. There was no, you didn't have a running battle with anybody in the street. People would shoot at you and try and bomb you, and there was all sorts of other dangers. But this was confrontational. So the opposition had fighter aircraft, artillery, all that stuff, and they had occupied the Falklands. And then, I never got to say goodbye to my mother, which upset me rather. I managed to ring her, but she said a really interesting thing to me before I got on the Canberra. We sailed down the Canberra, the old white whale as it was called. And she said a really interesting thing. She said, son, look after yourself. I said, yeah, Mum, I'll be fine. And then she said, whatever you do, look after them. Isn't that an interesting comment? Look after them, meaning the boys.
Yeah.
And it's resonated with me that all my life, that my mother had the kind of insight to say, this is not going to be about you going over the top, leading the guys to get medals. This is about you looking after them the best you can. Interesting, that, isn't it? And
very powerful.
So, yeah.
Wow.
And it's and it was a long way down there. Of course, a long way to sail through some heavy seas. Wondering whether we were going to get torpedoed, and then we transferred onto a landing platform deck. It's like another ship.
Yeah.
It's called a landing platform deck. It's called HMS Fearless or Intrepid at the time, and they've got landing craft in the back. And if there was a threat of anything, they used to lock us down below. And there's nothing worse than being locked down below under the waterline. That traits the mind, because that if you get bounced, you're not going to get out.
Yeah.
So that's a bit tricky. I found that a bit tricky.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying. That is very terrifying.
And then the war unfolded, and I have to say we were really badly equipped. We had terrible boots. We could have got better boots from Woolworths, I reckon, than the ones that they made us. They're made out of cardboard, so they just soaked up water. And we learnt. I learned some of my best lessons in survival. They were down there because it was bitterly cold, and the blizzards, and the rocks were covered with glass.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was saying a good friend of mine was actually in the Falklands, Ken, and he was a bootneck. And he was there with 4-5 and involved in that horrific incident there. And I see Andy most years at the Defence Academy, and he was saying exact same survival. It wasn't about it was getting out there in one piece. The weather was horrific. The cold. You only had one functioning helicopter, the Chinook, because the others were in the other. you had to borrow a door off another one. And then he said it was absolutely a cluster. But Ken, you were there firsthand. Tell us a bit more about it.
Well, and it was bitterly cold most of the time, and every trench we ever dug filled up with water. So I had to keep bailing it out. You know, I used to use my steel helmet to bail it out like a boat sinking.
Oh.
And you know, I remember it used to take about between 40 and 50 steel helmet loads to empty the trench I was in. I was sitting on a hillside with my boss, who was SBS, Special Boat Service, and he was an interesting guy, and he sat with me on a hill, and he said, I wonder if we got air superiority. He said, because it's really quiet, it doesn't seem to be anything flying around. And as he said that, he tempted fate there. As he said that, 4 Skyhawks came around the corner and dropped these bombs with parachutes right on the place, this old whaling station, where there was a medical centre, but also where the guys were all having their tea. They all gone down there because there was a cookhouse there, a galley, and we saw the last. We didn't know it was at the time, but the bloke running out of it, and that was the last one of our guys who'd been in there. We were very lucky; we didn't take a lot of casualties there, but then more ammunition at the same time, and the morale hit rock bottom. It was really tricky, and we flew forward a few times, and we got involved with 4-2's attack on Mount Harriet. Then we got involved in the attack on Sapper Hill at the end. And there were various incidents on the way. We got trapped in a minefield. That wasn't too good. A couple of blokes lost a leg in there. Or lost a foot, should I say? Sorry. That was we were in a tricky situation because a gun ranged in on us. So we had a 155mm gun shooting at us with, that makes a big hole in the ground. Should it not land near you?
That's not very nice.
Now, but it was pretty tense. Pretty tense at the time. Yeah, it's not very fair. A bit offside. And
yeah.
but eventually we made. But I remember my fingernails split. My feet froze. I had terrible cold weather injury afterwards. But I was, war is war, and we were there when the Galahad got blown up, and we helped the Welsh Guards, and all that terrible mayhem. 50 men killed in one go. One go. That was a hell of a tragedy. They stayed with us till the end. The Welsh Guards. We teamed up with them, and yeah. Mistakes happen in war, horrible things happen in war. The one thing that I found quite amusing, because I always have to see the funny side of things. Maybe I shouldn't all the time, but on the last night, it was a blizzard, and myself and a guy called Nick Hollow wandering around the position, which we couldn't see anybody, but we just saying, "Anybody in there? Yeah, are you all right? Yeah, we're okay. Okay, fine. Keep under cover." And we were covered in snow, you can imagine, and it was very cold. But near our company position, we suddenly found this little quarry, which may have been used to get grit to put on the road, to stop vehicles slipping, because it wasn't a proper road, it was a dirt track. And there was a workman's hut, which was about 2 foot wide, but we squeezed in it, and we were kind of like this, smoking a fag between, thinking, wow, it's great to get out the wind. That was all it was. Get out the wind. Fantastic. And that feeling of no wind was just amazing. And then Nick said, "Oh, the floor's a bit dodgy. It's a bit rotten." I said, "No, it's been moved." Oh. Anyway, so we pulled up the floorboards, and then we found this package. And he said, "What's that?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "It's a tent." He went, "No." I said, "It is posted. Christmas, God has sent us a present from heaven." And then he pulled up another thing, and it was a big tin. I said, "What's that? Oil?" He said, "No, corned beef. Argentinian corned beef." Corned beef, and we found corned beef, and we found sweet corn and a tent. Can you believe that? And so, yeah, just extraordinary. So we put the tent up, had some corned beef, and then I think we probably slept the only proper sleep we'd had for about, I don't know, nearly a couple of months. But I was the first. My boss turned around to me the next day. He said, "I want you to go back onto the ship because we're going to get back onto the ship." I said, "Really?" I thought, crikey, that was quick. Argentina surrendered, and we're going to go home straight away. No party. But anyway, so I I went back onto the ship, and it was a night. It was dusk. A helicopter flew me into Stanley. I saw all this detritus of war and Argentinian prisoners of war, all this kind of stuff. And then this little boat, this little Captain Pugwash boat, tiny little thing, came chug, 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 and picked me up. And then we chugged out to the ship. But I couldn't see the ship. I could just see mist. Through the mist, and there it was. And it was lit up like a Christmas tree. And I said, no, turn those lights off. What are you doing? And anyway, so in the middle deck of the ship, there's the mezzanine layer. And it was like a place you could walk around the whole ship. But they ripped up the planking, and it was just hard metal.
Yeah.
And I got on board, and I went, hello? Anybody there? It was like a ghost ship. Couldn't find anybody. And then right down the other end of the deck, I saw this person in uniform, and then I saw it was a girl in uniform. And on the way down, this one particular girl, I'd given her some survival kit. I managed to find her an immersion suit and some rations and a compass and some neoprene gloves. And I should have kept them for myself and my kids. But at the time, I say, look, you have these. If this shit gets sunk, you'll have a much better chance of surviving in the water because it will be deadly cold. You know, you have a better chance of getting picked up. Minutes. It would be minutes in that water, the difference between life and death. And then I saw it was her, and her name was Fiona. And she walked towards me, and she said, hello. I said, hello. It's me. She went, who are you? And she didn't recognise me. She couldn't recognise me.
Oh, wow.
Because I was just so emaciated. I'd lost 2.5 stone, something like that. I was obviously very thin in the face. I was bearded, hadn't shaved for a few days, covered in cuts and bruises and whatever. But she couldn't recognise me. And then I said, it's me, Ken. And then she burst into tears because she just couldn't believe what this apparition stood in front of her. Anyway, I kind of sat down then on the floor and lit a fag, as you do. That's kind of a fag.
SOP number 1.
And she said, "You can't stay here. You could get warm. You need to come inside." But I couldn't move. Then the whole weight of the whole thing just overwhelmed me. And they looked after me, those girls, and eventually everybody came back on board, and we sailed back, and the rest is history. But there was some times there where I didn't think we were going to make it. I just didn't think we were going to make it. It just all looked too bleak. Overwhelmed by cold, overwhelmed by the conditions. And it's like so many operations that all of us, and Scotty will back me up on this. It's not always the enemy that gets you, it's the conditions. Like all those people in Burma, like my dad was there, they all died from dysentery and malaria and stuff like that. And then you understand that you're not just fighting someone else, you're fighting the elements all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, Kent, after going through all that, you know, what then made you go, you know what? I mean, I now want to join the Special Forces. I'm going to put myself forward for selection. What was it? So you'd been through all that. What was it the push to see, you know, I imagine people do it for different reasons. What was your reasoning behind it?
Well, we got back, and typical at the time, you know, PTSD wasn't invented then. It didn't exist. Nobody knew. When somebody was having mental health problems, they were just probably told to, go and walk around the car park, smoke a fag, come back, drink some beer, you'll be fine. But there's a lot of people. At one time, there were more people who committed suicide who went to the Falklands than got killed.
Yeah.
And it had a real serious impact on some people. I can understand why. I won't go into it in great depth, other than to say that it was really only the beginning of people starting to understand what modern combat stress was. Because there was the old combat stress that we called shell shock, but that was a bit different from being constantly shelled. Although I knew what it was like to be shelled, I knew what it was like to be strafed by an aircraft. I'd experienced that. But there's an enormous amount of fear attached to these things, and fear is irrational. Fear is irrational. No one can. People say you've got to control your fear. Yeah, okay. It's different it's different for everybody, you know. But yeah, you have a responsibility to your mates to try and keep it under check. But you're still going to have an impact on you. So when I came back from the Falklands, I wasn't very well. I didn't know why. You know, didn't sleep very well at night. Collapsed one day when running, and I mean that's bonkers. Apparently, it's because I was hyperventilating all the time. I didn't realise, and I had difficulty kind of getting my breath. And but you know, we all soldier on, you know, until something goes pop or breaks.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of tours, I've been out to Gibraltar for a while. I've been to Northern Ireland another couple of times. And then I decided whenever it was, I decided to have a go at it. And it was the ultimate for all of us, because Special Forces, the SAS or SBS, they represented the best of the best, the elite of the elite, you know. And well, why wouldn't you? You know, you if you're a curious person, most of us are curious. We're all explorers by the very genes in our body. We want to have a look around the corner and see what's going on. Hey, what are they doing? And you see these guys in Northern Ireland, you know, kind of skulking about. Who's that? And then suddenly you realise that there are these elite operators. You know, before the Iranian embassy siege, no one really knew much about. They live in the shadows, and they prefer to live in the shadows because that's the safest place to be in a way. You don't want too much publicity. You don't want people running around poking you in the chest, asking you questions. So anyway, I decided to go and try SAS selection.
Like it's like you said, it's the elite of the elite. I'm going to ask you, and I know what the answer is going to be. How did you find it? Was it easy or was it hard?
Elements of it, because I was already mountain orientated. I didn't find the physical bit in the mountains too bad, but it wore you down. You get worn down. They start to really play with your mind and see, but no one shouts at you. No one's shouting at you. You're just told to be at a certain place at a certain time, and you get there with the right kit, and the right weight.
Yeah. Is that the actual first 4 weeks of selection, Ken? Is that what they really call selection, the hills phase?
Yeah. The first 4 weeks, very physical, a lot of navigation. You've got to be able to navigate well. You've got to know a map and a compass. You've got to have the confidence in horrible conditions. There's a place called the Elan Valley in mid Wales. Go there for a look. It's horrible. It's bogs, little crags, little mountain, little rocky bits, featureless, just desert but cold. And I remember falling flat on my face one day there. Absolutely just fell flat, pushing the mud, and I was lost. And thinking I'm never going to find my way back from here. And I did have a blub then, a bit of a cry, you know, thinking this is all too much. I can't do it. I've put up with some trouble so far, and here I'm in even more trouble. And then again, we're back in the same old thing. If you get through the first 4 weeks, and the endurance at the end of the first, there's lots of marches, but the endurance one at the end, long drag it's called. And it's not a cigarette. It's a long drag is long drag is 2 marathons back to back.
Yeah.
Carrying 60 pound on your back.
Bloody hell.
That's the equivalent of a 7-stone child, 6-stone child, isn't it? 5-stone child. I can't remember. But
it's
a lot of
heavy. It's very heavy, is what it is.
And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it in winter. I don't know how people did it in summer when it was hot. I'm glad I did it in winter because, you know, you can put more kit on when it's cold, but you can't take your skin off when it's hot. Yeah. So that was okay. But once you got through that was only month 1, you know, and then you've got another 6 to go. But it's hard. It's very, very hard mentally and physically. And a lot of people, I remember on the square when I started, there were 160 people there.
Yeah.
by the end of week 4, there are only 70 left. So we got rid of half of them. And they kept disappearing every day. I was saying, where's he gone? I haven't seen him. He must have gone. You know, there's all those conversations. But then it really starts after that, because then you're starting to have to acquire skills. And there's some fundamentals in life when you're a soldier. You've got to be able to shoot straight.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to shoot straight. People forget about that, you know, because you're not much use if there's a big target in front of you and you miss it every time. And, you know, so marksmanship is a principle of operations as a soldier. But yeah, the hardest bit I found was in the jungle. We went to Borneo for 6 weeks. I think we went there with about 50 people. We came back with about 30 people.
Yeah.
And some of that 30, then we were down to about 25 people. Oh. You know, massive attrition rate, because it's just really tricky.
I imagine the jungle being, because it's just the humidity. I think also as well I think everything wants to kill you as well. I think, you know, if you fall over, I'm pretty sure in that sort of humidity, if you get a cut, it's going to get infected. Surely it's that
you got pretty manky. That's true. But the biggest killers in the jungle are not snakes and spiders and stuff like that. The biggest killers are deadfall. You know, when a tree gets full up with water, imagine the top branches sticking out the jungle, they get all waterlogged and then they break off. And then when they're weighing 5 tons, they come whistling down. Like somebody chucking the roof off a building and just throwing it down into the forest, and that's scary. A lot of people get killed that way. Yeah. Flash flood, another big killer. People crossing rivers, and all of a sudden there's a bow wave of water coming round the corner. Some guys got taken out. SAS guys got taken out in Hawaii that way, of all places, because it is rainforest in places, Hawaii. Yeah. And then what was the other thing? Yeah, hornets. Hornets come in three sizes. There's big, really big, and then there's unfeasibly massive. You know, that's out of a comic strip, kind of hovering. Helicopter comes flying around, but if they sting you, shock. I think shock. I remember Gurkha died from shock. Yeah, SA selection is just, and you're learning skills, more and more and more skills being thrown at you. You know, can you now shoot your weapon while blindfolded, hanging upside down or whatever? I'm being flippant now, but you know, can you dive? Can you climb? Can you drive a vehicle really well? Can you navigate around complicated towns? Basic skills really, but some of them are hard to do really, really well. And there's each, you know, I was in a mountain troop, which I love being in a mountain troop because I was quite cozy there. Some people hated being in mountain troops, scared of heights. You know, but the skill range is phenomenal. You know, and then you have to go into sometimes, you know, you do the anti-terrorist stuff, and that's another big skill set to learn.
Wow. And see, after all the sort of continuation training and stuff that you do, Ken, what's it actually like? I take it there's not a big prom ceremony. Do you just march into the boss's office, staple belt, beret, well done, or is it you just there it is? Slap on the back to work Monday.
Yeah, no, there's no kind of pomp and ceremony. What happens one day is you get told to report to your boss. So you just one day someone says go to the clock tower. There's a clock tower in the camp. And on it are all the names of all the men and women who've given their service in Special Forces or in SAS since the Second World War. And on it, it's got the inscription, for those who did not beat the clock. And, you know, wherever you are in life, we're always against the clock. And then when I met my new boss there at that particular place, I remember he said, well done, begrudgingly. He said, well done. He said, and he gave me the berry and the belt, so I had to tear out of his hand, and then tug out of his hand, and he then said, "Remember, it's harder to keep that hat than it is to earn."
Wow.
And it is hard. I know.
Wow.
Yeah, that's sobering, isn't it? So you then back into that old crikey. Right, I'm really at the first rung on this snakes and ladders board, and it's not everybody's bag. If I was really honest, I think it wasn't. I don't think I was really totally cut out for it, and I'm very honest about that, because, you know, it's easy to run around with a big badge on your chest and, you know, big time it and say, hey, here, look. But you've got to be suited to it. And I think sometimes people aren't suited to it, and it's not because they're a bad soldier. It's because they just don't have the right temperament. And I'm not entirely sure I had the right temperament for it, to be honest. Did I enjoy my time there? Some of it. I love the guys I work with. It was very stressful from time to time. You never stopped. You never knew where you were going from one minute to the next. Would you change it? Probably not. Hell of an experience, but it's not everybody's bag. It really isn't. And there's some fantastic operators in British forces. I mean, you know, it's like the guys I used to really admire, who I worked with the ammunition technical officers, the guys who just did bomb disposal in Northern Ireland. They had balls of steel, you know, and you look at that, you read their stuff that they did in Afghanistan and Iraq. You read that stuff, and yeah, extraordinary. Some of the bravest men and women I've ever met in my life.
Yep.
You know, on that kind of bomb disposal story, without a shadow of a doubt. There's a whole memorial in Northern Ireland to them. You know, they were getting knocked over in Northern Ireland something like 8 a year. I mean, talk about attrition. You wouldn't want to sign up for that job, would you? Never mind joining special forces is not the be all and end all. It's not. And that's not me degrading to do some amazing things, special forces, but there's a big army out there. For every SAS man on the ground, there's probably 30 or 40 people backing him up in some respect. You know, they don't get the recognition, but there has to be a whole system behind that to make it work.
Oh, Ken, how long were you in the special forces for then? How long? Yeah, how long were you in it for?
Well, it's weird when you're an officer. It's weird because you go there initially as a troop commander. If you do really well, you get invited back to do something else. Yeah, because you can't stay there all the time because there isn't enough space. Other people need to be given access, and also, I think it's not good. It's not good. And so, you know, I went back to my battalion for a while as a company commander.
Okay.
As a major.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Then I went back for a bit longer. And then I went back to do a different job. I can't talk too much about them because that's right. But you know, so I toed and froed for a bit, which was great variety in a way because I went to have do something different and then came back in, and then right up to the end, and that's where I decided that I'd had enough.
Yeah,
it was kind of. I wasn't worn out, but I think I'd probably worn myself out. I don't, you know, I needed to regroup.
So then you went and left, but you've gone on to do some pretty incredible things after you. How long was it from leaving to then you decided to kind of get involved with Princess Diana and sending off is it 12 people with disabilities to I'm not even sure where it was. I think you can expand on it far better than I can.
Well, you know, back in 85, back in 95. Back in 95, we decided to do an expedition, and it wasn't long. It wasn't long before Princess Diana died, as you remember. There was a history of Princess Diana being the colonel of the regiment of the Royal Hampshires, and we amalgamated with the Royal Hampshires in the early 90s to form the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment. I was there also, yeah, as a company commander, and that was an interesting time. She was a wonderful person, and during that time we decided that we'd run an expedition, and we took some of these disadvantaged kids away to Africa and walked them for 500 miles. gave them a bit of SAS, are you tough enough, over the hills and valleys, and they loved it, and they all came back very different people from that trip. We were away quite some time, and that's how that whole thing started. That was filmed, that was filmed, but it wasn't till I left that I got into TV a bit with expeditions and stuff. In fact, I'm in the middle of writing my book at the moment, which I'll finish maybe in about 10 years' time. But it's all about exploration, but exploration in a broader sense of, we're all inquisitive. What's over the horizon? Because I think expeditions and doing expeditions don't necessarily have to be overseas. Can be up to Scotland, of course. Anywhere an expedition can be. It doesn't have to be 5 months. It could be a day, a little mini expedition. But it's this whole thing about positively influencing young people to get out in the outdoors, to understand it, and we to give them the right support and challenge so that they can build a future. And also that there are incredibly brave people, other than soldiers, other than special forces. There are incredibly brave people out there doing incredibly brave things and amazing things. And we got to get behind them.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. I know Scotty has his questions gone and lined up, so I'm going to go and give Scotty the floor now.
Ken, I'm just going to dive in. We've just heard a little bit about your amazing life journey so far. But again, to give the listeners a real insight into the man, the myth, the legend, Ken Hames, we're going to ask some just questions, just one-word answers, Ken, that will be really, really good. So, Alex, if you give me a shout in a minute, please, on the clock. 2, 1, and away we go. Wet or bruise?
Wet.
Oh, really? What's your biggest fear?
Moving water.
What would you change about yourself if you could?
Just to be less sensitive.
Good. What really makes you angry?
Dishonesty.
What motivates you to work hard?
Just to see the planet get better. Let's get the planet into recovery. It's been in turmoil for too long.
Good shout. If you're on a night out, and remember we used to have these a wee while ago, yeah. What would you sing in a karaoke pub?
Oh, I think it'd have to be Robert Palmer. Addicted to Love.
What is your favourite book to read?
I'm a bit strange in that I love reading mountaineering books. So my favourite book is a book called Alpine Glow, which is a description of all of the 50-odd mountains in the Alps over 4,000 metres.
Well, there you are. There's 1 minute with Ken. We now know what he likes to sing.
Amazing.
Oh,
that's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. We just got a few more questions, Ken. Just some quick ones as well. I just wanted to know what your favourite moment in the military was.
I think sometimes driving that tank, 52 tons of power. Nobody got in my way. Nobody got in the way. Yeah. Through all
was that as a tanky or as an officer?
Tanky.
Well, that's all right, because I would never put an officer in charge of a tank. One, he doesn't know where he's going. Sorry, Ken. Or two, he doesn't know how to operate it.
No.
Oh, fantastic! And what would you tell your younger self when first joining the army? If you could go back in time.
I tell my younger self to not to worry so much.
Oh, brilliant! That's a really nice answer. That.
Mm.
And then
I'm worried a lot.
It's quite a very powerful statement, that not to worry, because I think we worry about a lot of things that haven't even happened, I would say. We think about things in a different negative light. And I must admit, there was a period of time where I will probably still do a worry about quite a bit, but instead of trying to embrace it and work through it, we do kind of have that worry. That's quite a good point there. Yeah. It's very good.
And then our final question, as a military family charity, we just like to know, what does family mean to you?
Well, unless you're a kind of dedicated hermit, some people like to be on their own. I've never been that way. I've always been a people person. My family, it means everything. Family means everything. When you get as old as me, you realize that it is the most important thing. Well, your health, of course. You want to be healthy. But your family is so important. When times are really hard, which they've been recently, you're looking for your family. You're looking for that support from them. You're looking to give them a hug. You're looking to all that, and only when you cannot see them do you realize how much you miss them.
Yeah.
And I think when times are really dark, dark, it's the thing that keeps you going, is your family.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. And very, very true.
Very, very strong. Very, very strong. And when's this book coming out, Ken, and what's it called?
It's called Over the Horizon, an Explorer's Handbook. It'll be out by the end of this year, but it's a bit anecdotal because I thought, you seem want to write a survival manual. So I wrote some of the stories about, having been in the water in the South Atlantic, what it's like to be in those harsh conditions and what you can do to alleviate your suffering in some of these harsh environments. So experiences, and on the mountain, what you really need to think about, apart from being a climber and having ropes and all that paraphernalia. Yeah, that's technical stuff, but the basics of going into that environment, what would you think about before you go, and things I learned, which I wish I'd known before. So there's all those tips.
Learn the hard way.
Yeah, exactly. And you get those tips, don't you? Like tape up your feet before you walk. Put Vaseline in your crutch before you march. Make sure that the water, as Scotty said before, make sure the water you're drinking is not going to give you a bad tummy, because you don't want a bad tummy out there. You don't want to have diarrhea. Well, when you're already working hard and suddenly have to go to the loo 3 times a day and all the group has to stop while you run into the bushes. So there's lots of stuff in it like that, which and a little bit on camels, yaks, mules, anything that can dogs,
transportation,
anything that can pull you or carry you. Much better than walking, isn't it?
Absolutely. I can't wait for that. Is that?
Yeah. And it'll. But I would just hope people enjoy reading some of the anecdotes in it, which are quite funny. Some of them, when you go in the woods for a poo, and then you suddenly realize when you get back to your tank that the hood of your tank suit gone like that. You've gone like that.
Oh my goodness, my head's nice and warm.
I'm assuming this may have happened to you. This is all,
But as you say, going back to that skill set, there's just so many things to learn. And I said, look, you can have all that lovely bushcrafty type of stuff, lovely axe, machete. You've got to learn how to sharpen it all, because most people can buy it, but they can't sharpen it, so it doesn't work anyway.
This has been fantastic. I mean, Ken, you've told some absolutely great, fascinating stories, giving some great insight as well into what it was like, and also some great leadership tips as well. I mean, but what it takes to lead and how to do it. I think this has been absolutely fantastic. So, I mean, thank you so much for taking part. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you everyone for listening to episode 10 of the Give Us Time podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Follow us on all social media. Make sure to go and follow Ken as well. Ken, thank you so much for today. And thank you everyone for listening.